Today, is it time to stop blaming immigration? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one of the latest posts covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian and New Zealand flavour. And today I'm joined by Joe Wilkes from New Zealand. Hello Joe, good to see you again.
Good morning, Martin. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. We're, I suppose, reeling a little bit in New Zealand from the events of last Friday, which I think has just cast a cloud over the whole country. It's been quite an emotional 3 or 4 days since Friday afternoon's terror attack, and I don't know. It's been a strange one. Obviously, we couldn't connect yesterday because of bandwidth issues. A lot of people phoning in and out of the country, trying to check on loved ones and family members. And I think it's a time that a lot of us probably just need to sit down and reflect on. The causes behind all of this. And I don't want to give the guy who caused or carried out this atrocity any time in terms of giving his name or publicising it, but I think that there's a lot of things that I don't know, we all need to consider as being part of a root cause of these issues.
Yeah, I think it's a point about reflection, and makes you ask some rather important and perhaps more fundamental questions about society and the way things work at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you look at society, and we're all, I suppose, very much driven by what we're fed in the newspapers and what we're fed by the press. And I think that one of the things that I'd just like people to reflect on for a moment is that there's been a lot of discussion both in Australia and in New Zealand and in the UK and in America about the whole immigration into countries creating pressure on housing and resources. And yes, it's part of a contributing factor, but I think that the thing that a lot of us need to reflect on is that house prices aren't high just because of immigration. They're high because of a number of other factors. And you and I are firm believers that the biggest factor leading all of this is the way that the monetary system is run within our countries, and the way the banks have been allowed to go and create these massive asset bubbles, where sadly there are people who feel now that they are marginalised. I mean, I've done my trips to Auckland. I've seen the people homeless. I've even wonderful towns in the UK. You've got people homeless in places like Bath. There's a lot of homelessness in and around London, even on the outskirts of London areas like Hemel Hempstead. And the people who are living in parks. And these people, I think, if they're marginalised and they're starting to feel that they don't have an opportunity to progress in life because the starting point or the bar for the starting point has become so high, it's no surprise that some of them are finding a route or a desire to blame somebody else for it. And I don't think the press are helping. I think we keep hammering this, immigration is causing these massive house price rises. It's a small contributing part to a wider issue, which I think that you and I know, and we need more people to spread the message that it's not about hating individual groups of people or blaming individual groups of people. It is about looking at the fundamentals behind our financial system.
Absolutely. Well, you can say, I think, quite clearly that there have been policy settings which have been wrong for at least a generation, and that has basically driven credit availability through the roof, and therefore home prices through the roof, and therefore it's killed housing affordability. And the amount of debt in the system, as we keep saying, is now to the point where it really is unsustainable. And all of those things were actually set by policies. And so there is a question as to who is really accountable for this. And then my concern is that then the politicians turn around and try and blame something else, like immigration or something, right? Rather than actually facing up against the fact that they created the problem in the first place.
Yeah, and many of them have lived lives over the last 30 years where there hasn't been any policy change because it's always suited the next government to come in to just carry on the way things have been going before. These questions need to be raised and aired in the public, and we need to start thinking about the societal pressures that people are under. People are under stress. They're under financial stress. they're looking at the world and saying, well, who the hell do I blame for this? I'm not saying this is, well, actually, no, it is. This is very similar to what we saw with the rise of certain parties during the 1930s after financial crisis. And I don't think that there is today the same cohesion that we have in policy, between countries that we had in 2008 and was able to get people or get the economic system out of the hole that it had placed itself in then. My concern is that we're now in an environment where things are becoming more fragmented politically. You've definitely seen it in the UK, the whole Brexit debacle, which is ongoing. I look at it and think, well, you can't make any decisions anymore because nobody really knows which route to turn to, and everybody still is looking for people to blame on the periphery. So it's got to be Ed, and I'd like people to share the start of this post. We're going to go into some property stuff as we normally do, and those are important messages as well. But I think that people do need to start to wake up and just not just listen to what you fed in the papers.
I think that's right. And interestingly, I was talking yesterday to a backbencher in politics at the moment, and he was expressing to me, firstly, the fact that he gets a lot from the DFA channel, because actually he thinks that some of the stuff that we touch is very important. But he also said it's very hard in a political sense to get any of this stuff really into the discussion, because those at the front of the party, those leading the way, have quite a myopic and narrow view. And what he basically said was, we need to think differently about some of these issues if we're going to actually find a way out. And I think that's quite an interesting observation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And this is where the framework still of politics and of the media still seems to be, in my view, largely governed by, I can't switch on a TV over here, Martin, without seeing on Channel 1, there'll be a property programme. It'll be location in the UK, interspaced with home loan ads, with banking adverts for mortgages. I'll turn over to another channel on mainstream TV and you'll have Love It or List It Vancouver. And again, this whole hyping. Then there'll be a New York property show on Channel 3. And there are occasions where you can switch on the TV and 6 out of 9 channels will have property focused stuff, which is driven by the advertising that is in amongst it. And it's not uncommon to see several of those adverts that are bank driven. So question marks needs to be raised. You and I know that Australia and New Zealand have benefited from this debt bubble with the fake perception of GDP growth, which yes, there is good GDP and there's productive enterprise happening in both economies, but there's an awful lot of it that has been driven by this perpetual churning of debt and increase in debt every year. Somebody in politics needs to go and stand up and say, well, actually, let's put this out in the mainstream. I've seen several articles this week, and we'll go on to property now, but there's an awful lot of bank commentary now. The major economists at the banks are going out there, and there's a whole host of reasons being offered as to why New Zealand is different to Australia. And yes, it is different in some ways, but the fundamentals of credit are always overlooked. We talk about supply, we talk about the building booms. I've discussed in previous posts that we've actually got a building boom going on at the moment where we're building at a rate that is right up there with the 1970s rate that was used to house the baby boom generation, and the risks that we've got in the system, because there could be the new properties competing with the baby boomers retiring all out there in the market over the next few years. Now, the economists are out there desperately trying to talk this up. And the reason for it is that we are, I believe, seeing a massive reduction in the demand for credit. All the banks are now competing very vociferously on lowering their offered rates. Before Christmas, November, when we had the foreign buyer ban come in, there were a handful of banks that went on offering teaser 1-year mortgage money at below 4%. They quickly rose that during December and January, but we're now back at a situation where, because the volumes of property transactions is falling off a cliff, they're back offering rates below 4%, but they're also offering them at 2-year terms. So there is this desire, like you saw with ANZ's 10-year interest-only mortgage offering in Australia last week, there is this desire now to try and prop this up this fake economy that's leading to marginalised parts of society who are trying to find somebody to blame. Just run through some numbers, if that's okay with you. First of all, I read, and you probably read already, that half of, and this astonished me, that half of the properties, the apartments sold in Sydney and Melbourne in February, I believe, were sold at a loss.
Yep.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to see that now. Auckland sales volumes during February were the lowest sales volumes for a non-January month. January is obviously where everybody packs up on holiday for Christmas. They go away and they don't look at houses. But it's the lowest sales month for a non-January month since 2010. So we're back right into levels that are post-GFC sales levels. Overall sales down nationally in February from 6,576, this is around the country, 6,576 in February 2018 to 5,954. So nationally there's been a drop off in sales volumes of 9.5%. In Auckland, February sales fell from 1,654 in 2018 to 1,358 during February of this year. That's a drop of 17.9%. So there's a huge change in sentiment. This goes back, in my view, to the marginal buyer, that foreign buyer ban that's come in. And that's not about immigration. That's about people who are speculatively investing in property. And we know we've got 33,000 odd houses that are empty, not rented out, and being sat on in the Auckland market alone. Median prices have held up, so the people that are buying these properties are going to be borrowing a lot more money than they have done previously. And again, we're seeing the average mortgage, which had dropped off, average new mortgage or first-time buyer mortgage, which had dropped off below 400,000, has now gone back over 400,000. So people are borrowing quite heavy amounts of income. But at the same time, we're seeing stock levels rise nationally. And it's not because there's an awful lot of new listings coming on, it's just that the length of time to sell is eking out longer and longer. Nationally, realestate.co.nz figures, we've now got over 38,062 houses on the market as of yesterday. In Auckland, it's tipped over 14,000. So when we spoke in January, mid-January, it was just over 11,000. It's now gone to 14,245. And the Trade Me equivalent numbers for Auckland showing 13,971. So we're at a stage now where the stock levels are rising. And I don't think people really appreciate yet that marginal injection of cash that we talked about in, I think, the second post we did, the more on the New Zealand property market, that facilitates an awful lot of movement everywhere else around the country. One buyer buying a house in Remuera at 4 million, that money can be spread around the country with a purchase in the Hawke's Bay, one in Wellington, and the subsequent purchases that follow on from that. So we're starting to see that impact. I think that the foreign buyer ban is an important part for redressing the balance of New Zealand society and allowing the next generation an opportunity to well, hopefully at some point buy in their 30s, because the way it was going, they were not going to be buying a house even in their 50s. So it's an interesting time.
Yes, indeed. And of course, what's fascinating about this is that you see stock levels begin to rise and you see the sales volume begin to fall. And then the next thing that happens is that home prices start to slide. So there's an inexorable linkage, right? Now, I know that prices have slipped in Auckland over the last few months, but I think in some of the other centres around New Zealand, they're actually still rising.
Yeah, the two larger centres, and what I think we need to focus on here is that house prices, they don't get impacted immediately. So there will be a lot of people who were still benefiting from these very high prices in the summer of last year, in June, July, August, September, October of last year, who will have cashed in, and for a period, they will be looking at spending that money in other areas. So they might be going to the Hawke's Bay, they might be going to Christchurch, Wellington, Dunedin, wherever else. It might be Tauranga and Taupo. But what you also have is that period where you've still got many first home buyers who their experience sets your desire to go and buy. So if you've had a year or so where you've been looking at houses, missing out at tenders, missing out at auctions, missing out at sealed bids, your experiences of loss. So what you'll tend to find is before the market really starts to nosedive, there are a small minority of these buyers who they've just lost so many that they will still pay high prices. The new buyers who are coming in, they will look at the market and say, well, hang on a minute, this is slowing down. That house has been on the market now for 5 or 6 months. Their experiences are different. They're not experiencing loss. So what you tend to find is that their mentality is very, very different. So two things. One, the experience of the inexperienced buyers will change as they start to see more. But also that cash surplus that was sat in accounts where somebody's cashed up in Auckland, they've moved to a rented property while they decide where they want to go and buy. That money will still be spent for a period of time. It might be 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, but I think we're already starting to see the volume of that money, just because the volume of transactions is dropping off a cliff, the volume of that money is less than it was before. I tried, and obviously we had to cancel our session on Friday, but I tried to film an auction in Auckland. I wasn't allowed to film it, but I thought that it was worthwhile attempting, because it was an auction where there were a number of lots. There were actually 11 lots on the list. One was withdrawn prior to the auction, but I just thought I'd run through the lots. I'm not going to give people's property addresses, and I won't say which specific auction it was on Friday, but we'll just run through the lots because I found it absolutely fascinating watching. The auction room was not particularly busy. There was one thing that is different to some of the auctions that I've seen in other parts of New Zealand, is in that there was no vendor bidding. So the vendors weren't allowed to counter offer against somebody else, or not actually in the auction room. But there was some counter negotiation where things didn't get to reserve price. In short, I'll run through the properties. First house that came up, lot one, was well, I don't even know how to describe it. It was a shed with some windows, and it looked like maybe there were a couple of windows that were missing. It was fairly common in auctions to go and put something that you think is going to go and be very, very popular in the market as the first. It hypes up the energy in the room, and you know that is normally what an auction process will do to try and keep the subsequent momentum going through the auction. It was the most popular property. It was sold below the registered valuation. There were 3 offers for it, so 3 parties bidding for it, sold for $505,000. It wasn't a central Auckland property. Lot 2 had just one bidder, started at $480,000, went up to $530,000 and was passed in. Lot 3, there were 2 bidders. It got up to a final bid of $850 with a bit of negotiation outside the auction room before being passed in. Lot 4, just one bidder. The bidder started at $840,000. That was the only offer on the table, and then it was negotiated and sold for $890,000, which I think was the highest price that was achieved on the day. You've got to think the Auckland median price currently around $850,000 according to February, so that was the one house that actually sold for over the median. Lot 5, 6 were, I don't know how to describe it. It was like I changed environments, and we were all of a sudden in a library where people weren't allowed to speak. So there were no bids on either of those houses. Lot 7 was withdrawn before the auction, and my guess is that that's probably about the owner saying, well, I don't have anybody who's going to come and bid on it today, so there's no point putting it up, and so I might as well save myself some money on a failed auction, because these auctions cost you money whether you sell or not. So you go and put yourself to auction, you go and have a no bid situation, that's it, you've lost your money. Lot 8, back to the library, so it was very quiet, no offers on that one. Lot 9, one bid, and this I find quite phenomenal. There was one bid that came in at 700,000, and there's always this threat of, oh, if you don't go and offer now, then we'll put it to the unconditional offers. So there are thousands of them in the pipeline. There aren't, because sales volumes are falling off a cliff. But that started at 700,000, sold at 830,000. Lot 10, two bidders, got quite competitive, got up to 885. And then was passed in because it was well off the owner's expectations. And then lot 11, final option, was back to the library, so we finished in silence. Room was empty really from lot 5 onwards. The people had come for the first auction, and it just got quiet after that. So we're in a situation that is very, very different to what vendors are expecting. They're not being told this because there's no publicity about the realities of the market. You know, all the bank economists, we're different to Australia. We're not going to see house price corrections. And my concern is that there'll be some people who, because they're being given mistruths, are actually going to miss out on the opportunities to cash in. The guy who turned down 885, that could be the best offer in the market. The press aren't giving him any information, and it would be a shame if you're entering retirement and you're thinking, well, you know, I want to go on these cruises and I'd like to go and downsize to the Hawke's Bay or wherever else it might be, that your next bid in the market was 840 and you've thrown away the cruise money for a few cruises, to be fair. So this is where there is this you know, the hyping of the bubble by the bank economists, and the press sadly are completely in their pay.
Well, you know, I've been highlighting in Australia the plight of what I call the down traders. So precisely those people who've been sitting on quite significant pools of equity because they bought years ago. They've now got to the point where they want to release some of that equity. And the surveys in Australia are now saying that a lot of these people are getting really, really twitchy because they now are seeing prices begin to slide, and they actually are trying to put those properties on the market. But exactly the same here is going on insofar that estate agents are not being truthful about where the current market is. So there's still a mismatch between the expectation that down traders have. They're still thinking 18 months ago, right, compared with now. And so again and again and again, and I've been around to some auctions here in Australia too, the same things are happening. So they're not actually getting these properties sold, and people are not accepting that prices have already come off a little bit. And my concern is, as yours, Joe, is that as we go forward on this, more and more of that equity is going to be eroded, like it or not, because prices are going to continue to slide. So the new reality is you have to accept a lower price if you really want to get out and save some of that equity.
Yeah, well, I think that the industry's probably very guilty of it, and this is where I've been down in Australia and New Zealand now for 18 months, and I suppose the way that the industry performs is everybody in an office regularly are all against each other, so they're all competing for listings. You may find that there will be one firm in a suburb, or sorry, there might be 5 firms in a suburb, but one firm might get 2 people from within the same office called out to go and appraise a property, and then maybe one from a third office. Even 2 people within the same business, and you'd like to think they've all got the same access to what their company sold over the last 6-12 months. They don't. They're only focusing on what they as individuals have sold. And when you've got, you know, if you look at the sales last year, so we've got over 15,000 estate agents registered with the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. Last year there were 82,000 transactions. So that's an average of you know, about 6 properties, 5.5, 6 properties per agent. Now, you're going to have a lot of agents out there who may only sell 1 or 2 properties. I went on a viewing while I was up in Auckland at the weekend just to have a chat with a few people. And one particular agent, I said to the lady, do you mind me asking what comparable evidence you've got to support the price that you've put on the property? And it was a rarity that there was a price of the property, because a lot of them were by negotiation or tender and deadline stuff. And she said, oh, well, I sold this one 18 months ago, next door but one. Okay, that was 18 months ago. Have you got anything else that you can show me to support a valuation from the last few weeks? Oh no, I only concentrate on my properties. Shit. So the level of education within the market and also within the businesses, and I've spoken to a couple of businesses, some very good meetings Thursday last week, where the whole transfer of information from the main business, the main core franchise owner, to the people within who are operating the business is still very, very poor, and that has to change, because the result of it is that people are not getting the very best advice. If a price is lower than you're expected, that price should be delivered to you at the point that you have a market appraisal. You should have enough evidence to get a price. I'm not saying that you're going to get it spot on. Nobody can get a market spot on, but most good agents should be able to give a fairly good indication based on comparable evidence that's recent to give an owner an idea of a price within 10% or so. Yeah, it might be 10% high, 10% low, but it should be within 10%. What we're finding is that you can go around a road and there can be 5 houses that are identical. They'll be $300,000 apart because nobody has access to the data, and it's not easy to find when you do.
No, well, it's interesting. Certainly over here, there's a heavy reliance on a couple of the indices published by some of the big research firms. But of course, people have not yet woken up to the fact that those indices are being driven by settlement data, which is 2 to 3 months old.
Yeah, we always had the same in the UK. We'd be on the front, we'd be on the shop floor, looking at putting business together, and the national indices, the nationwide, the Halifax House Price Index. They were always, because by the time they've collated their figures, they're often 3 months behind the point that the deal was done when the price was agreed initially. So when they've lent the money and completed it, and people like REINZ and Land Registry in the UK. They don't get the data often until a month or so after it's completed, so they could be 5 months behind the curve. So we're going to see some more data that's negative, just because of the experience of the volumes of transactions. So that'll come as we go through the latter part of the summer and into the autumn.
And the other behavioural thing I've noticed here is less and less disclosure of sale price. So when the auction happens, if it happens in very low volumes, then now with not actually publishing that information. So more and more opacity in terms of actually what's going on the ground with transactions at the moment. And that, of course, is all a signal of bad news.
Yeah, well, we're quite interesting in New Zealand because it's one of the only countries that I've met where the government put a valuation on everybody's houses, and it's like the banks and the government in tune together to underpin the market. Sellers stick by their RVs. I'm not budging off my registered valuation. Buyers, sadly, are often suckered into paying their registered valuation. And the information that we're now seeing from auctions and from other sales is where it's close to the RV, it gets published, or if it's gone over, because there are still a few that are going over the registered valuations, you'll see the data. If it's off, no sign of the RV on the published data. So it's a bit of a fallacy, and the whole registered valuation model that's operated, they're going to have to go back and review everyone's registered valuations, because they bumped many up by 30 or 40% during a very easy credit boom with a lot of foreign marginal cash involved and filtering around the market. That foreign cash isn't there now, and the registered valuations are starting to look a bit daft. So
I think it's true to conclude, Joe, that momentum is going to continue to ease and prices will continue to fall.
Yeah, but what I would like for people to think about as well is that, and going back to how we started this post, is immigration is not the driver of house prices. It is credit, and we need to think about events that happened last week. Realise that there are people who are being fed information that isn't complete. Give people the complete picture. Let the press give people the complete picture. And let's try not to marginalise individual communities within our economies, and let's not blame them. It's nothing to do with it. It is far more the banking system that we've gone down the route of. We've continued to run down it, and it's failing now.
Yeah, time for a different perspective, Joe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks for your time today. Good to talk to you.
Cheers, Martin. Good to see you.
So there you have it, a very important message from Joe there. And just to re-emphasize the point, the key driver of home prices up and home prices down is all about credit and credit availability. And as credit gets tighter, prices will continue to fall. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time.